Hello, I'm John Key, former Prime Minister of New Zealand from 2008 to 2016. It's my real privilege to actually join you at the Asia-Pacific Agri-Food Innovation Summit. Look, there's so much to talk about really in the food space, but I guess let me start by taking a step back a little bit and say, you may know a lot about New Zealand, you may know nothing at all, but for those of you who know a little about New Zealand, you'll understand that we're a great food producing nation. We've always really been good at food for a couple of reasons. Firstly, we're blessed with our climate. We have a very arable land in New Zealand, great place to sort of grow things, fantastic grasses, and we have tremendous amounts of sunshine and rain. So unlike some parts of the world that really struggle with water, for instance, or have too much of it, we seem to have about the right proportions of rain, sunshine, and very good soil. So we produce tremendous food on the land, in the water as well. We've done tremendous things around our seafood resource. Both shellfish, but also fantastic deep sea fishing in New Zealand. And we have one of the best systems in the world actually for sustainable fishing. We have the quota management system where we regulate the amount that commercial fishers can take in varying different species, and we auction off that space. And if there is a depletion of resources, then we scale back the amount that can be caught, and if we think those resources are doing better, we can increase that. So moving back, I suppose, to what we grow, particularly on the land for a moment, it's not just our geographic conditions. What really has made New Zealand tremendously successful has been innovation and science, really the heart of probably what you're talking about at your summit. So why has that been important? Well, in the really early days, it was sort of innovation really around how we moved our products to market. So refrigeration was the really big thing. We had refrigerated containers. We used to get legs of lamb in those days, put them in those chilled containers and send it off to market, which was largely in the United Kingdom. And so that really opened up the world markets for us when we did that. As time went on, we realized that science and innovation could drive how much we produce, what we produce, all sorts of new and different varieties. So just to give you one really simple example, if you go back to about 1970 in New Zealand, the national flock of sheep in New Zealand was 75 million. The time the population in New Zealand was about 3 million people, so you get a sort of bit of a sense. We were outnumbered by the sheep in New Zealand back then. Today the national flock is under 30 million. It's probably around about 29 million sheep in New Zealand. Why? Because we're increasingly having more dairy cows and more cattle in New Zealand. But interestingly enough, actually what's happened is the amount of lamb meat that we produce out of New Zealand's actually been increasing. So why is that? The answer is we've been fantastic at using science. Well, as I said, our use of science, and you remember early on I was talking about the rainfall. Well, the rainfall made me move location because it's raining again in New Zealand. Anyway, farmers will be happy. So going back to the science, we have about 29 million sheep and we produce a lot more lamb meat than we did with 75 million. So that's our ability to have and produce lambs, to keep our sheep alive, all of the sorts of different things we've been doing, have feed a lot quicker through reliable ryegrasses, all of those kinds of things. So I think one of the big things that's going to happen around innovation in food is certainly going to be around science and innovation, and I think you will see the envelope getting pushed, particularly with genetic modification. It's quite a hot topic in New Zealand. It will be in lots of other countries. I know in China, for instance, it's quite a hot topic as well. And I think sometimes when we talk about genetic modification, people get very confused. They think, we're gonna breed a cow with a sheep, and that's going to produce something really weird. That's not really what we're talking about. What we're actually talking about is, for instance, the genetic modification of two types of ryegrass so that they become drought resistant. All of those kinds of things. I think you can see tremendous innovation. One of the reasons I raised that is because I wanted to spend a little bit of my time today talking about a company called Impossible Foods. So I'm an advisor to Impossible Foods. We make plant-based meat. If you take a step back, the founder of Impossible Foods is a guy called Pat Brown. A real genius. Pat came out of Stanford University. He's really known for his work in microbiology. And he's, I think Pat would agree, a climate change evangelist. He believes that we need to resolve the issues of climate change, as indeed I do, and has sort of asked himself the question, how would you do that? Well, 18% of world emissions come from agricultural emissions, so methane and nitrate extracts from animals. Bluntly put, the burping and farting of animals is what causes problems. And so the world has been looking to say, okay, how can we deal with that issue? And he worked out that plant-based meat would be a solution for that. In fact, if you, in theory, could replace all of the livestock in the world that's used for meat consumption today, then you could resolve the real issues of climate change. So that was the starting point of really what he was about. So he went away and said, look, it's not a new idea, for instance, to have a plant-based meat product. For years, vegetarians and others have looked at products like that. The difference has been that they don't taste like meat. And so, yeah, there's a market that doesn't want to eat meat at all, and that's interesting, but that's not going to resolve that issue of the enormous numbers of people around the world that want to eat meat, but also want to do the right thing around climate, for instance. So the challenge there has been, how do you make it taste like meat, smell like meat, and give you the sensation of meat? And the answer was in an innovation of a product called heme. So they worked out that what really makes meat smell and taste like it does is effectively blood. And so the way to resolve that was get a replica of blood that was plant-based, and that was heme, initially from soya extract. Now they can brew that. Impossible Foods have a worldwide license on heme. And so if you go and have a look what's happened, we've now produced for instance, the Impossible Whopper burger. So if you think about the Whopper burger that's in the store right across America, the plant-based version of that, the Impossible burger, on any given taste test to a huge number of people, tastes like meat. And so it tastes like the Whopper burger. And at that point, where you're ambivalent between whether it's actually ground beef, which is about 50% of meat use in the United States for burgers, lasagnas, all of those kinds of things, or whether you have a plant-based product, then all of a sudden you can see why people would substitute. And then you look at the issues like, for instance, plant-based meat has more protein and iron, for instance, than you get out of actual meat. And then you don't have the animal livestock issues and a variety of other issues that go on. So Impossible is one player in that category. There are obviously others. Beyond Meat is probably the best known listed product, but there are others around the world. Do I think they'll take over entire world production in day one? Obviously the answer to that is no. And should a New Zealand farmer or a farmer around the world be absolutely threatened by Impossible Foods? Again, I think no, funnily enough. But what I think you will see is substitution taking place in the same way that people move from sheep to dairy cows and various other products, kiwi fruit and the likes. Indeed, I think you can see them moving towards producing the crop base used for a product like an Impossible Foods. And I think, there maybe it takes some time to get a product that's, for instance, the replica of a steak, for instance, but already plant-based meats are moving very rapidly, and you're seeing them in chicken and pork and tons of other different and varied products. So I think the future does sit in that space. Interesting enough, I think what you will see is countries like China, for instance, who are very, very focused on having enough food supplies. The security of supplies will always be their big issue. I think you're going to see them really wanting to embrace a product like plant-based meat, like an Impossible product, because again, they use a lot of ground product and dumplings and all sorts of other dishes that they make. But secondly, they want to control their food supply, and that really helps in this product. So that's going to be, I think, a really massive part of what we are going to see in innovation. And so all I'd really sort of say to you is, as you listen to the various speakers over the next few days, think about and have a look at these different spaces and category. Look at the plant-based meat and what's happening. There's lots of other products in that kind of space actually that are doing incredible things, and you're seeing them around the world. And I think you're going to see a lot happening in that innovation. And I think you will see increasing demand actually happening for the scientists in this area who are coming up with these brilliant and novel and different sort of products. You'll also see it, for instance, in packaging, where you'll see long life products, people being able to keep packaging. And I know, for instance, Fonterra, New Zealand's biggest dairy company, has been doing a lot in the UHF milk space and long life products, so that again, for the Asian market, they can live on the shelf, not refrigerated, and last a long period of time. So that's the future of what we're doing. Finally, just to sort of mention one other last company that I do a bit of work for in New Zealand these days called Zespri. Zespri is really the dominant player actually on exporting kiwi fruit around the world, and again, innovation has been incredible there. Started with a green a kiwi fruit product, and gold has become a fantastic product with what they call the G3. The G3 is sweet and juicy and a fantastic piece of fruit. We grow in other countries around the world, including in Italy, so 24/7, 365 days supply. But in recent times we've been coming out with a red product, and that's just again a sign of the innovation. So it doesn't really change the flavour too much, the texture is about the same, but actually people like it for food decoration or just the sheer beauty of it. So heaps of innovation happening in lots of different things. Enjoy your conference. Unfortunately it's virtual, so you probably don't even get to try some of the products of companies that would normally turn up and feed you, but maybe you can just have a nice hamper of something at home. All the best. And finally, if you haven't been to New Zealand, can I encourage you to come down. It's an amazing country. Tourism's at the heart of what we're doing. COVID-19 obviously having a big impact on the capacity of people to come to New Zealand at the moment. We're actually basically COVID-free in the community in New Zealand, but we have very tight restrictions on who can travel to our country at the moment. So when that loosens up, come down, have a holiday, try some of our fantastic food and wine, make yourself at home, and enjoy your conference.